Right, that's 11. I mean, that could be 110 linear feet of asphalt. That is not necessary. The second question is, so now that it becomes rental, what is the estimated sort of rent for 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms?
The rents are going to be in the range of about $5,000, $4,000 to $5,000 a month. And understand that this is not an apartment. This is an independent living senior facility, very similar to Segovia, very similar to the other projects out in Palm Desert and Rancho Mirage. There are like 4 or 5 of them. And they get those kind of rents because the residents get meals, they get housekeeping. It's a very different model than an I mean, you see it as apartments, but the operation is independent living for seniors. It's a very different thing.
Okay, as far as the architecture or sort of the facade of the building on Tapwick, before it seemed that you had this playful shaded louver light that has this on and off kind of shading. It kind of played with the building exterior wall. And now it seems that you have this repetitive push and pull for about 300 linear feet. What was the design intent behind that?
Jerry?
Yeah, well, to increase the units, and I'm going to work from the units back into the project, to increase the units, obviously we had to make them a little narrower. So within each wing, we increased more units along each facade. We wanted to keep the rhythm of the stone and keep it on the same elements that we had before in the bump outs. So that's why it appears a little more push and pull on the ends where you were referring to, where we had the canopies cantilevering over there. It just, with the configuration of these units, it was very difficult structurally to make that work without enormous amount of cost to put in for those canopies to cantilever in 2 directions. And so what we did is we put the balcony there and still, have that movement on the building. Originally, we only had a window on the ends. We had windows on the ends on the main facade side, and now we have balconies for a portion of that. So to answer the question, we tried to keep as best as we could with the quantity of units, the rhythm very similar to what we had before.
What kind of surface is the parking area?
Well, it's kind of, let me explain. The surface of the main driveway coming in will be combination of possible pavers and concrete, where the remainder of the parking will be asphalt.
Okay, thank you very much.
Commissioner Hirschbein. I'm sorry, I had called on Commissioner Lewin previously.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And gentlemen, it's nice to meet you. I have a couple of questions for you. What do you estimate the legal pool capacity will be in the new configuration, the number of people that will be allowed there?
I could answer that, Lauren, if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about capacity yet, because I'll talk more about water square footage versus previous and now. Is like Lauren said, we are going to reconfigure the pool a little bit to have both amenities, the resort and the lap. So the original pool was approximately 4,100 square feet of water surface area. And the pool that we're going to propose here will be probably around 3,900 to 4,000. So it's not going to be that much smaller than the previous pool.
And let me just say that as we were trying to get these changes made, I asked them to put frankly, a placeholder for the pool that looks smaller, but my intention is to, I have a lot of land there, and my intention is to put a pool that is essentially equivalent to the resort pool. I believe that there'll be people who will want to use it for exercise, but I've always felt that this is like a community. That I'm trying to create a community for the gay community seniors. And I expect that there'll be a gathering area. So I want both elements of the pool. And recently we were shown a design that kind of offers both of those. But it will ultimately be the same size as the one before.
Well, but the difference being that there were two pools before, now there's...
Of course, right. But as a result, I now have this beautiful garden area with pathways and walkways, and it's just a movement of the amenities from one area to another.
And so do you have a goal of trying to accommodate 40 people or 50 people at a time? Or because I don't know what square footage is really translate to.
Well, it's hard to gauge that. I could tell you that the restroom facilities in our project is based on a 4,000 square foot pool. But a 4,000 square foot pool, you could actually have quite a few people in that. Even if you took what the code states as 15 square foot per person, you wouldn't do that in a pool, but that's a lot of people.
Okay, I'll be very transparent. I don't think you're really answering my question. I understand you're going to build about a 4,000 square foot pool, and you're not quite sure how many people would be allowed to congregate in the area. Is that correct?
That's correct. We don't know that.
Okay. So a couple more questions. I see in your redesign, what was labeled buildings 10 and 11 are removed, and you've kind of got a large grassy area. That would be, I guess, to the north of the property, the opposite side of the parking area, right?
That was the pickleball courts, are you talking about?
What I'm seeing is on the side opposite, next to the pool, there's a series of walking paths and an open green space. That's between the pool and the building.
Yes.
Just my question to you is, would you be amenable to us requiring shade trees along those walking paths, because it's very, very hot, and if your target demographic is senior citizens and you intend for them to walk through these walking paths, are you okay with us conditioning that shade trees be planted on both sides of that?
Yeah, I think our intention, and I think it's expressed in this, that we're going to use the same trees that we had already submitted in the last project. And they're essentially shade trees. Of course I'm going to have shade trees because these are, it's hot in Palm Springs.
Sure, but Mr. Monroe, unfortunately, many of us don't have the benefit of whatever happened before. We only have the piece of paper in front of us, so I'm glad to hear
maybe, I don't know if Glenn could tell you what was included.
Okay. I wanted to know, would you, as the developers, would you be okay if we required that a certain amount of the trees on the property are fruit-bearing trees, such as tangerines or pink grapefruits? And I ask that because that relates to our city's sustainability guidelines, that where possible, we incorporate edible fruits, not to build an orchard by any means, but to have it available throughout developments that are similar to this. Would you have any objection to having a certain percentage of trees be fruit-bearing trees? Yeah,
to be honest, I can't really address that without talking to the landscape architect and understanding what the ramifications are for the project in terms of maintenance and things like that. We're thinking about having in the back area where the pickleball courts are, we're talking about putting like a community garden there, which a lot of these projects have. But I think to agree to that now without understanding the ramifications, I wouldn't be comfortable with that.
Okay. And my last question has to do with the plaza or parklet, which is labeled object, I think, number 9 on the map. And there was a little bit of not sure if it's a plaza or a parklet, but it's supposed to be a public benefit. Does that have a water fountain, benches, or shade trees in it? Can you describe what's going to happen?
Yes, I think that was what was designed. You know, as Glenn said, this was in connection with our seeking to get the right to put pet services in the building. There was nothing in the retail building. There was nothing about our project that required any public benefit but for that. But we did agree to put in a water fountain and benches, and there'll be a big shade tree.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Oscar, because in fact, our pedestrians, a lot of people that rely on public transportation, it is very, very hard for people to navigate the last mile from their bus stop to wherever they're going.
Sure.
So having a little bit of respite from the sun and the ability to drink some water really could save a person's life at some point in time. So,
of course, and of course, I'm designing a project that, you know, I want the people who live there to enjoy, and I get that shade is a very important aspect of Palm Springs.
Mr. Lewin, I might want to point out on the retail, which we're not changing, on the east side of the retail, that roof actually, it's hard to tell on there, but that roof actually comes out quite a bit and creates, you know, probably 8 to 10 feet of shade beyond the building itself. So it's an area where people could sit and gather.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sherman. But ultimately, that will be private property. If the business owner wants somebody to not stand there, they can say, move on. But this little parklet would be for public use, right?
Yes.
So but I appreciate you pointing that out. That's why my concern is more with that public amenity and whether it would be sufficient for people that really needed to rest their feet as they make their way from point A to point B. That's all my questions for you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Hirschbein.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. You mentioned when we were first reviewing this, I remember being told that although there's a dining room, there was not a specific meal plan. It would just be you'd go and have dinner and you'd pay for the dinner. If you didn't want dinner, you wouldn't pay for the dinner. But you just mentioned in terms of the rent would include meals. Is that correct?
That's correct. A certain number of meals. The way these places operate typically, as part of your rent, you get a certain number of meals or a certain number of points that you can use towards meals.
So that's a change to the operating model, is that correct?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay. I think that's a good idea. I think we all expressed the idea that you should have had a meal plan in the original idea of the operating plan, because I think it will contribute to community. I'd also strongly urge you to include a community garden area. I do have a question, though. In terms of the exterior parking, what is the furthest distance a resident would park and then before they entered the building?
Okay. Okay, great question.
I know.
Probably 300 feet, roughly.
300 feet. How long does it take to walk 300 feet?
I don't have that answer. I don't know.
Okay.
But realize that there is a motor court. You could drop off at the front of the building.
Well, you have to go park your car.
No, I know, but I'm saying if some of these people have some assistance or if they...
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a resident that parks further away from the building.
Yeah, it's under 300, roughly around 300 feet, I would say.
You think it's roughly more than 300 feet?
I don't think it is, no, because it's not longer than a wing. If I align the wing to the parking, it's about 300 feet.
300 feet, okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Baruzzi?
This change to an independent living facility is a pretty major change. My mother, for many years, lived in independent living, and this is in Florida. There was a nurse on staff. It's a whole different model completely, actually. I guess the term apartment is very misleading because my mother had to pay a large fee to enter and then paid a monthly fee, but never was considered an apartment per se. Anyway, these independent living facilities often have financial troubles, and unless they're very well managed. I mean, what experience do you have in managing an independent living facility?
Me, personally, none. I have identified, though, someone from the community, from the LGBTQ community, who lives in the area and has had many, many years of experience. So that person will be running the project.
Okay, so they will be managing the day-to-day operations.
Yes. And while it is, I mean, I understand, there's a lot of confusion about senior housing and independent living versus assisted living. And, some of them are independent living, but they provide assisted living services, for an extra fee. But in my mind, this is about seniors. It was always about seniors. As a condominium, I don't see it as anything different other than when I found that independent living, I was told you provide meals and you provide housekeeping. To me, that was not anything different than I envisioned. This is, in my mind, about LGBT seniors living in a place, and paying to live there in one form or another, but to be together. And so I don't see it as, I understand my mother lives in one as well in Boston. And, but the independent living part of my mom's is not very different than what I was proposing originally.
The only thing I would say about your comment is when it's a condominium, you're building equity and you can leave that to your children or whoever. This is an apartment building. There is no equity. So
of course. I mean, that's a marketing issue for me.
Yeah. Anyhow, okay. That's all I need. Thank you.
I just wanted to, there being no other questions. This looks to me like it needs some buffers along Hermosa. The edge of the building is there. People are walking by it. Have you looked with your landscape person around how you're going to treat Hermosa?
We've only talked about it, in concept, but I mean, the idea was that we were going to place more trees along Hermosa than perhaps we were going to have before to create that buffer. And I thought that the plan to date showed something like that.
Chair, if I could mention, this is Glenn. So what the plan doesn't show is a required 4.5 foot tall wall. Anytime parking abuts a public street, they have to provide screening, and that is not shown on here. So they will need to add that to the plans.
Yes. And just
from an aesthetic point of view, I mean, I want to have trees there.
Yeah. And please note that on Hermosa, we actually stepped the building back quite a bit further than we originally had. So we do have more landscape area now there.
I'm merely mentioning that there's a requirement that I think you haven't met along Hermosa.
Are you talking about fencing? Because the property will be fenced on the north portion. We do have that.
No, the zoning code requires that when off-street parking abuts a public right-of-way, you need to screen it. And that's usually done through a landscape berm or a 4.5 foot tall block wall or fence.
So you're talking about the residential stalls that are on Hermosa. Yeah, we will comply with that.
I'd rather see the berm. And just a question on the dog park. Is that dog park only for the retail portion?
No, it's for the residents and the customers of the retail.
And won't people be walking their dogs in the walking paths of the property?
I suspect they will, yes.
So that won't be screened off from dogs since you have walking paths.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, I'm just asking about your anticipated pet policies. You've got a lot of area that used to be pickleball courts and swimming pools that is now walking paths. In that area, residents will be able to walk their dogs, correct?
I guess I haven't even thought about that, to be honest, about the operation. I haven't discussed this with the person who's going to be running it. I mean, I think we always anticipated that most people would bring them to the park.
They may not if you have walking areas.
That might be, but we had walking paths in the other project. We had a circular path, but I don't know that we ever considered that.
People will bring dogs both places. They'll bring to the park to socialize and they'll walk. They'll take longer walks along your walking paths.
Yeah.
That's just, so that is open to the residents, but it's not open to the public, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Except the public that's using the dog grooming area.
That's the dog grooming, and there'll be like daycare. There'll be doggy daycare and even a pet hotel, hopefully, as part of that. So those dogs, and there's an entrance from that side into the pet park. So those animals will be able to use it.
And have you looked at landscapes that keeps this looking less like a sea of parking and asphalt in the front of your building?
Have I looked at it? No, but I have instructed the landscape architect that I don't want a sea of asphalt.
So we don't yet have a landscape plan, we just have a concept?
Yeah, my understanding was that I then go back to AAC before I pull the building permit, and they have to approve that, and then it comes back to you again.
Chair, to be clear, so there is a final PD that will be submitted and reviewed by the Planning Commission. So that would include a final, very specific landscape plan. So if you remember, they had groups of trees. So they could pick from a Palo Verdes to a Tipu to a mesquite. So they haven't nailed the shade tree down yet, or a lot of the other plants, but they will come back to Planning Commission with the AAC reviewing the landscape plan.
I'm just a little uncomfortable with not seeing more of a plan, because my understanding usually with the PD is when it comes back, we're looking for conformity with what the original plan is. And if this isn't a full concept, I'm not sure how we look at conformity.
Well, you look at placement of trees and within the general scope of the type of tree, the size of tree. So there are preliminary plans that you have looked at before that when the final plan comes back, it's much more specific than what you see at preliminary.
Okay, to be honest with you, I wasn't here for that. So it isn't something I've looked at.
That's right, sorry.
I think
many of us have that experience.
Yes. Commissioner Hirschbein.
Are we in discussion mode now?
No, we haven't closed the public hearing yet. Are there more questions for the applicant? Commissioner Song.
Yes, I forgot to ask a couple of questions. The shade structure shows it to shade only one row of parking spaces. How do you plan to shade two rows back to back? And also, what is roughly the height to the highest point of the curvilinear part of that shading structure?
I think there's some misunderstanding. Glenn said that was the shade structure that we had chosen. I had been asked what the look was that I was trying to achieve, and what I was trying to convey. So that is not necessarily the shade structure. In fact, Robert Rotman, my designer, has recommended that we don't have a curvilinear, that we have a flat. What I was trying to convey is that the shade structures will be rather than these ponderous, heavy things, I was trying to convey that they would be lighter and more airy. And so these two that we found kind of convey what I'm trying to do. And because I'm coming back to you for final, I haven't determined that yet. We're still looking for the appropriate ones. But my understanding is that the plan, Jerry, and you can tell if this is correct, is that all of the parking spaces will have shade structures.
All of the residential.
Yeah.
The residential. We'll have, but to answer your questions, I mean, this will be designed structurally to span that. They can span it double-sided with these. The company, one of the companies that manufactures these, actually has done it many times. So we will have something that will span.
And roughly what height, or is that too specific right now?
I think it's a little too specific, but I don't think it's going to be more than probably 10 feet, 12 feet high at the high point, I'm guessing now.
Okay. Would you be amenable to reduce about 10 parking spaces to allow more landscape into your site design?
I think, Lauren, I'm going to throw it to you. My only concern is as long as we don't take it away from the units themselves.
No, as long as we have enough of the units, I'm fine with doing that. I mean, frankly, I'd like more landscaping, to be honest.
I believe you have enough you meet the requirement for housing and also for retail. And
yeah, then I'm fine with that.
And the last question, which I apologize, but I would like to clarify, is before you had two flanking buildings on Tapwick with a smaller dog park, and on this design, you are removing one of those two buildings and increasing the size of the dog park.
No, this is the same design that was, we only had one retail building all along.
Let me clarify, Commissioner Song. So on the plans that you have, with the two comparison, the one on the left is an earlier version. The approved version includes the larger dog park and the one building. So this was provided by the applicant. This is an older version of the retail along the street. They since have combined, and there's only a 4,000 square foot building.
Oh, I apologize for that confusion. I didn't realize that we submitted.
Yeah, my apology. Grabbed the wrong plan.
Thank you.
Commissioner Marusi. We're still at questions.
Yeah, so this is on G101, the side-by-side comparison. So it's really radically different because there's no small corner park on this depicted either. So is this pool on the left side, you're saying that the surface area of this pool on the left side is equivalent to the surface area of the pool on the right, in the new?
changes from Cortan to powder coat. I think they need, to Commissioner Song's point, they need to look at the rhythm of the balconies and the projections, because that's changed substantially. And then those end elevations have changed as well. So I'd like to get the AAC's input on a preliminary level, because I don't want this going back to AAC with everything decided, and then they feel like, well, gosh, it's already been approved by planning, so we don't really have a bite at the apple here. And I'd like to give them that bite before it goes to a final design, before it comes to us for final approval.
Can I interrupt? What you're suggesting is that this isn't at a point that we can make a decision. So we're looking at giving comments on what things we want to see before we get.
That's one. And the other one is, I'd like it to go to AAC after they've made those changes based on our comments. I'd like it to go to AAC before it comes back to us, so we have AAC's comments in hand and we can act on those or not, depending on how we want to do that.
Is that a motion?
I'll go ahead and do that, but I haven't listed the concerns. I guess we can talk that.
I think we would go forward and list the concerns. I actually would second that as a motion. I don't think this is ready yet. So I don't know, just to get a voice feeling from the other commissioners before you begin to list concerns. Is there agreement with this?
There's agreement from my part.
I agree that we should postpone this and see see more changes that we can understand.
Commissioner Irvin and Commissioner Lewin?
I also agree.
Madam Chair, I'd just like clarification then. Because I don't think the staff report really teed this up necessarily in a way that I understood. It was always going to go to the AAC and then come back to us, correct?
No.
No, if the Planning Commission were to approve the amendment, it would go to AAC, the landscaping would go to AAC, the final PD would come back to the Planning Commission. That would have the details of the building elevations, the site plan, all they have to be ready to go. They have to start construction within 6 months of when the final PD is approved. So it's got to be construction documents ready to go. So it's not there yet, but that is what we would expect when it comes back to Planning Commission.
Okay, in that case, Madam Chair, I support the direction that this commission is going, but we need to give direction to the AAC and see a much more completed project. It is a much more significant change than just the conversion from condo to apartment.
So we will go from there with Commissioner Lewin. I think we've got a motion and a second, and we want to give comments to the motion.
I have a question.
So, yes.
Do we have any purview over discussion on business model, or is that completely off the table?
I don't think that's completely off the table, because one of the things you've discussed is we're making a conversion, and we were asked for a conversion to apartments, but it actually is a different business model than an apartment model. So I think concerns about that are in order as well.
And I would like to see, I'd like to understand.
You don't have the floor yet.
Pardon me?
You don't have the floor yet.
Okay.
It's still Commissioner Hirschbein.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The floor to express concerns, and we'll get to you next.
Well, I'm open to everybody's concerns. I don't want to have anybody's concerns not addressed. But I'll throw out a couple. I'm concerned about parking 300 feet away from the entry to the building with my groceries from Stater Brothers and trying to schlep them into the building. I think 300 feet in August, that's not such a great thing. And I'm just throwing this out there. maybe we don't have this grand entry drive off of Hermosa. Maybe it comes off of Tockwitz, and you can get more parking closer to the building. But I'm trying to picture 300 feet in my mind, and I think it's from my house to the corner, and I'm about 5 houses from the corner. I wouldn't want to have to carry my groceries that far any month really, but in August to get into to a conditioned space. I think that's problematic for me. So I'd like you to look at trying to get as many of the residential parking spaces as close to an entry to the building as you can. That'd be one of my comments. I'd like to see a community garden component. I think that would help develop your sense of community, and I think you've agreed to that. I also think that a landscape buffer along Hermosa that would buffer the parking areas is better than a 4.5-foot concrete block wall. I think that might be it for me, and I'm open to everybody else's comments on that.
Why don't we go around with Commissioner Maruzzi being next?
Maybe I'm overly concerned about the business model. It's just I know where in Florida, a lot of these places have not done well and have come close to going under, which is not a good thing for the residents. I understand there are a number of these in Rancho Mirage. I'd just like to have some understanding of how or why they are successful, and if there was any information on which ones weren't and why. Because what I just don't want to happen is if this thing didn't work for whatever reason, people, elderly people would have to move out, and it would be rather traumatic. So I just want to better understand the model.
Speaking to the model, I'd also like to have an understanding of the proposed operator. That's usually key to the model.
Yes.
And I financed, I worked in the workouts of buildings like this. So going around, did you have more concerns on the project itself, Commissioner Maruzzi?
No, I think the other comments cover what I was concerned about.
I know, do we want to go to Commissioner Lewin, or shall we go around to Commissioner Lewin, Commissioner Irvin, and then Commissioner Song? Do you have additional comments, Commissioner Lewin?
Yes, Madam Chair, I do. Since we're giving direction, I believe, to the AAC to help work this project out, or to the applicant, these are my comments. I agree with Commissioner Hirschbein that the applicant should look for other parking opportunities because it's not just the 300 feet to the entrance. If you're actually in one of the far units on the 3rd floor, it's a significant difference. It seems to me that the center of the Y, where the old swimming pool was, might offer opportunities, but it's not for me to figure out. So consider additional parking opportunities closer to the building. My second request would be to ensure that the swimming pool is adequate for 122 units for reasonable use. It doesn't mean the water, I mean the whole pavilion, the swimming area. That the public parklet will have water fountain, benches, and shade trees. That the walkways will have shade trees on both sides, and that at least 10% of the trees will be fruit-bearing trees. And I bring this up again because it's part of our Path to Sustainability document, and they've done a wonderful job of including the solar by law, but we sometimes forget about the trees. And I'd like to share with my fellow commissioners that today's applicant is proposing apartment buildings designated as assisted living in some form or another. But we know that buildings last for decades, and we don't know what a future use would be. And I think it should be designed for one day it just might just be apartments and anyone can live there and there may not be any assisted component. That happens. And so making sure that the swimming pool is adequate, that the parking distance are reasonable, that our path to sustainability, that fruit trees are incorporated, goes towards approving a project that could withstand a change of use in the future. And those are my comments. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Commissioners.
Commissioner Irvin.
Sounds like Paul covered everything. So, he had quite a list. So I'll agree with what the other commissioners have said so far.
Commissioner Song.
Yes, I would like to add, the previous design considered Tackwitz as the main public boulevard or major thoroughfare type of scale. It had lined trees, it had shaded sidewalks. In a way, I am completely agreement with Commissioner Lewin. I'm just putting qualitative words to enhance the fact that there was that kind of sensitivity to Tackwitz and Hermosa, and those have been lost. So I think it's very important to the scale of this project that the landscape is designed in conjunction to what it does to the building. The second thing is that perhaps to Commissioner Marusi's point is maybe Mr. Ostro would provide a plan B and a plan C. So if the dining model of independence living doesn't work out, then he has a plan B because I'm pretty sure Mr. Ostro want to keep this project ongoing for a very long time. And then the last part is to mention the fact that they are very open to reducing the number of parking spaces to increase the landscape areas as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
So so I would go and just say that the number of parking spaces be reduced in what we see by 11. My concerns with this are seeing a sea of parking along Tackwitz that looks not like an urban model, but a suburban model of a sea of parking in front of a building. I want Tackwitz. Tackwitz is really important, and the way the parking's been handled changes the feel from the street. And I think Tackwitz how that's handled is really important to us. I would like to see this planned out so that we're seeing a preliminary plan that isn't, I would like to change this later, and we see something that we can, when we get the final, we can compare it to. So I agree with everybody else's comments. But Tackwitz, the treatment of Tackwitz and the parking is significant to me. I do believe that we also, this needs to go to the concept of changing to apartments and going to 122 units is perfectly fine with me, but I don't think with the changes being as major as they are, especially the changes to landscape and parking that you have done, you've really changed what the project looks like, and we need to see something that is going to work. So I'd like it to go to AAC to look at the changes on the buildings and also have them come back to us, have you go to them with changes to the green and open areas that make sense along with the changes, and then come back to us after it's gone to AAC. Commissioner Song, you had other comments?
Yes, I do want to thank the design team and the developer for increasing the setback to the buildings and creating a smaller footprint. It really gives more breathing room, and also to sympathize how challenging it is in the construction world to put the financing together for a project of such scale. Thank you.
Anybody else, and anybody disagree with any of the things we've asked them to look at? Commissioner Lewin.
I don't disagree at all. And Madam Chair, I wanted to thank you for identifying what was in my head that I couldn't articulate. And it is, so much of it is, and Commissioner Song, that the change to Talkwoods Canyon Boulevard, which is kind of our Wilshire Boulevard in a sense. It is a major thoroughfare from the airport to the downtown. And I'm not the architect, so I know it's going to go to AAC, but it may be that flipping the parking from Talkwoods to over to the Hermosa side does a full change to how it's perceived from our main boulevard. And I'm only throwing that out as an idea and thanking you again for identifying how important the Talkwoods corridor is for everyone. So I'll support the motion.
Glenn, do you have enough in the way of comments?
Right. So, Chair, your action would be to continue the public hearing to a date uncertain and instruct the applicant to go back to the AC based upon the comments that you've made, and then we will re-notice the public hearing when it's ready to come back to the Planning Commission.
I think thank you. That is the motion. Are we ready to vote on this? Hearing no, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewin?
Yes.
Commissioner Song?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Woodsey?
Yes.
Chair Weirmuck?
Yes. Can I ask, as we call the roll, I think it would be really good to call the maker and seconder of the motion first and then go through the roll. It always puts the newest commissioners on the spot to have them be the very first people voting on something. I noticed that this is the way City Council calls the roll, and I think it would be great if we did that.
Yes. Sounds good.
Thank you. We have the fourth item before us. It is 6:15, and I am anticipating that this would be a longer item. Would we like to take a break? Commissioner Song?
Yes, at this point, I would like the commission to excuse me, for I would not participate on the review of this project for professional reasons.
Thank you. You are excused. You are recused.
Thank you.
For the rest of the commission, would you like to take a break, or should we just move straight through this? I would like a 10-minute break.
I would too.
Okay, we will reconvene at 6:25. Thank you. Thank you. Moving along to 2D, Desert AIDS Project in partnership with the Coachella Valley Housing Coalition for an amendment to a planned development district, a general plan amendment to change the land use designation from P-PQP and MDR to mixed use, multi-use. Review of a draft development agreement, adoption of a mitigated negative declaration for CEQA, and a major architectural application for the addition of an 18,000 square foot medical office space and the construction of a 61 unit special needs housing complex located at 1695 North Sunrise Way. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I'd like to do is, for my presentation, I'm going to focus on the technical aspects of the project and then and go over some of the actual design elements, but the architectural team that's here before you today will do a much better job than I will. So I will focus on some of the determinations that the Planning Commission needs to make. So as you mentioned, this is the Desert AIDS Project in coalition with the Coachella Valley Housing Coalition. And as you mentioned, there are four cases that are before the Planning Commission. The first is a general plan amendment that will modify the land use from P and QP to and medium density residential to mixed use multi-use. The other second application is an amendment to the Planned Development District 281, which was for the Desert AIDS Project, and that is to expand the boundary of the PD to include all properties owned by Desert AIDS Project for a total of 13.2 acres. The amendment will also establish development standards for setbacks, a setback reduction for the residential building, and an increase in building height and calculation of density. The third application is a major architectural application to include an 18,000 square foot addition that will bridge both the DAP building and the annex, and then the 61 unit special needs housing project. And finally, a review of a draft development agreement which requests a 10-year entitlement time period and also fee exempt. So on this slide, this is the overall site plan that's proposed for the Desert AIDS Project expansion and the 61 unit housing complex. It's located at the corner of Vistachino and Sunrise, and the applicant will go over some history as to how the project has evolved over time. But this slide is just to show you the relative location of where the project is at. So the first application is the general plan amendment, which is to change the use from P, which is professional and quasi-public, and mixed use development, medium density residential to mixed use multi-use. This allows the boundaries of the PD to expand to include all the properties that are shown here on this site plan, and also allows deviations to the development standards. In looking at the general plan land use designations, you'll see that Vista Sunrise 1, which is the residential complex that was built a few years ago on the corner here in Vistachino, and then the actual clinic building and the annex building, which is the former Riverside County Health building here, and the parking lot are zone PQP, and then the vacant lot where the residential housing will be built is medium density residential, as well as the Sunrise Business Office building where DAP has their administrative offices currently. So the proposal will be to change all of these land uses to mixed use. And you'll notice on the top of the slide, the shopping complex across the street is mixed use also. So this will be a continuation of that general plan land use in the same area. And as you know, this corner is a very active corner with multiple shopping centers, Walgreens, and then the DAP complex. So to amend the planned development district, we'll expand the boundaries of the PD to all 13.2 acres of the complex. It's a PD in lieu of zone change. It'll reduce one setback, increase the apartment building height to 30 feet. The requirement now is that the apartment complex be 24 feet. And also how we calculate density. The density for the residential units will be spread out over the entire 13.2 acres instead of the acreage that is for the vacant lot itself. Also, there's a development agreement. So a development agreement can be used within land use decisions by the Planning Commission, and the agreement seeks entitlements for 10 years and also fee exemptions for items like building permit fees and then some outside agency fees. And keep in mind that this development agreement is a draft version that the City Council will make a final determination. So the major architectural, as I mentioned, is the 18,000 square foot pavilion. This office addition bridges the gap between the health clinic and the annex building. There are changes proposed to the Sunrise Way elevation, the construction of the apartment complex, and then a new dog park retention basin at the rear of the property. So the proposed pavilion has a maximum height of 24 feet at the entry, and it meets all development standards. The pavilion proposal is in the brown, which is in the middle of the project, as I say, that bridges the DAP building and the annex building. Types of uses that will be inside that building include a cafe, offices, a lobby area, meeting rooms, and other medical admins, the pharmacy, and nursing stations. So what I'd like to do now is have Rickman Harris talk about the traffic circulation.
Before you do that, Glenn, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In the construction of the pavilion, can you just talk about the phasing? Is the dog park included in what we're looking at and the changes to the parking area?
Right,
and
Chair.
what would be built when?
Right. Well, I'm going to come back to that, and we'll have long discussions of the phasing and the dog park. So if we could just for 1 minute focus on there's been a lot of comment about the traffic circulation, and we want to address it sort of in the beginning of the presentation.
Go ahead.
So right now on this slide that's before you, it shows three entrances and exits. So there's one along Vistacino, one that is here that is currently a left turn in. Of course, the pavilion building will now block that, and we'll discuss that in a minute. And then also this intersection next to the new apartment complex. So when looking at an aerial photograph, you'll see that there are medians within the street that run along Sunrise, and Rick will talk about what the changes are here.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the Commission. What you see on the screen right now is, like Glenn said, it's an existing picture of what the medians are now currently. There was a traffic study done, which is in your packet, and after discussing this with the applicant and the city engineer and the traffic engineer, there was quite a few items that we discussed. One of them being the applicant was proposing a new traffic signal to be located at that existing median break in where Glenn is indicating there. that posed a lot of problems for the city, and we felt that that was going to be a lot of problems for the shopping center. And it was a little too close to the intersection of Vista Chino. It just made things very problematic. The traffic engineer involved with this project put together some exhibits and some alternatives. And in your one of your attachments is the traffic analysis, and it is going to be page 9, exhibit 1-4, which is alternative number 2, which is what the city is requiring of the applicant to be built. And in that exhibit, you can see where there is there is no additional traffic signal to be built. All of Sunrise, with the exception of the left in for what would be in the future the back of house deliveries, with the exception of that left in going northbound on Sunrise, all of Sunrise will be right in, right out only. The turn pocket that is just south of Vista Chino for the 2 left turns going northbound will be made longer so that queuing can hold more cars. That's part of the ultimate build out of Vista Chino Sunrise. That will be made to a total length, I believe, was 300 feet, 350 feet, something like that. Be slightly longer than what it is now. And after a lot of discussion, this is what the city's requiring of the applicant. And the entrances on Vista Chino would be right in, right out also. And that really kind of concludes and wraps up what the traffic circulation does for this project.
Thank you, Rick. So in summary, there originally was a traffic light proposed at this intersection where you come out of the south portion of the inline building at the Stater Brothers Shopping Center to go across where the new apartment building would be built. So part of the design is that these medians will be extended and landscaped. And then this left turn in will continue to be there. However, when you leave the property, you can only go south going out of the property. You cannot turn to go north. So continuing on looking at parking, there was a discussion of the required parking that's proposed. So for the Vista Sunrise 2 apartments, there will be 61 apartments. However, they're proposing 31 parking spaces. And within the zoning code, Section 92.23.17 allows special needs housing developments to be calculated at a different parking ratio than what normally would be required for multifamily residential. So this is using a 0.05 per unit parking ratio, which will result in 31 parking spaces. And I'll show you where those spaces are in just a minute. So for the pavilion and the annex, there's a total of 261 spaces that are being provided. 107 spaces for the Vista Sunrise apartments, which are existing, the 31 for the Vista Sunrise 2, the new construction, and then the DAP Business Center is 58. So in total, there'll be 457 parking spaces. Keep in mind that if there are more residents of the apartments that have cars, more than 31, there are other parking spaces that are available and could be used throughout the day. So going back to the site plan, the Vista Sunrise apartments located here, the 31 parking spaces will be located around the perimeter of the site. These spaces will also have carports that will shade the parking themselves. And then the remainder of the parking for the development is to the rear, and that is existing today. There are some additional parking that is added along the very back. And then the parking at the DAP Sunrise Business Center where the admin offices are here. There is no vehicle connection between the business center and the rest of the campus. There is a pedestrian connection, but not a vehicular connection. So part of the plan will be to reorient the opening sequence to get into the complex, and you'll see that there's a little curvature, and the applicants will go over a detailed design analysis. As I mentioned, there are slides that are included in your packet and included in this slideshow that show revisions to the Sunrise Way elevation, and that's what this is showing here. And I'm going to quickly go through these slides because the applicant will have greater detail of these streetscapes when their presentation comes forward. In the packet, there's material boards, and we will go over in greater detail those elements. Cross-section showing building heights. I would like to point out that the very top cross-section shows the maximum height of the residential building at 30 feet. Several other cross-sections showing how the apartment building will relate to the rest of the street. And then some design elements of the front building, of the annex building, and then the DAP building itself. So on the Vista Sunrise Apartments, there will be 60 units plus one manager's unit, a front yard setback of 25 feet, and a maximum height of 30 feet to the top of the roof. There are plans and elevations showing the design, and in just a minute we're going to have a 3D model that we're going to show the entire site. But I do want to mention that the 25-foot setback is along Sunrise Way. Normally it would be required to be the same height as the building of 30, but they're requesting that it be set back 25 feet. However, the building elevation, the third story of the building starts several feet back, and they'll give you an exact dimension so that the building that faces Sunrise is 2 stories and it steps back to a 3rd story. Within my slides here, there are floor plans that you that show a community room on the 1st floor. So there will be a live-in resident manager that manages the building, and the Coachella Valley Housing Authority representative will go into greater detail on that in just a minute. So there are building elevations showing how the floor plans relate to one another. This is the 3rd floor showing how the step back is from Sunrise Way here. And then the roof. All mechanical equipment will be on the roof and will be screened. So this slide shows the multi-purpose education center, the computer lab, officer manager's office, the lobby, and then also there's a laundry room on the 1st floor. The building materials, the applicant will go into greater detail on the mosaics that are proposed and the different colors and design materials. There are slides showing how the interior courtyards will work, what the insides of the design and the landscaping inside the project, and the different colors that are proposed on the interior. So looking at landscape hardscape, we'll look at the Vistacino entrance, Sunrise Way entrance, the Vista Sunrise 2, and then the detention basin that Chair Wormick was asking about. So the project was reviewed by the Architectural Advisory Committee, and there are several recommendations that they had, and that includes some of the landscaping. So you'll see that the landscaping is mainly focused on the main driveway that will be reoriented with a drop-off plaza, the dog park retention area, which is to the rear, and then landscaping around the Vista Sunrise apartments. So there are details of the types of trees that are proposed, tipus, palo verdes, and also other sculptural trees to provide presence and a sense of arrival to the Vista Sunrise entrance, and including pavers for the pavement of the streets. And looking at the dog park there, it's a suppressed detention basin. You'll see that it includes DG and some gravel, rocks and rubble, and then some turf with trees within the retention basin itself. As I mentioned, there's the types of entry shade tree, the parking lot shade tree, the detention basin, and then other examples of trees that they're proposing, as well as shrubs, accents, vines, and ground cover. They're also including, they'll discuss the types of hardscape materials, including the walls, the pavers that are proposed, benches, and fences. And also including lighting, there's bollards, there are tall lights to light the parking lots, and also there are shade structures that will be placed over top of the parking lot areas, and they'll also be solar. And that's what this plan shows, is the schematic lighting plan for the site. So as I mentioned, AAC reviewed the project on July 20th. They made several recommendations to the Planning Commission that includes a parking lot shade tree, the lighting plan be resubmitted and looked at, the canopy structures be restudied, color samples provided for a final PD review. The gate, would it be possible to gate the service driveway from from Sunrise into the back of house operations? The copper roof on the annex building should be restudied for final PD review. The dog park access, landscaping, and fencing to be refined, and then enhanced landscaping along Sunrise Way and Vista Chino. So all these recommendations that are before the Planning Commission will be used to come back for a final PD review. There was a CEQA initial study that was conducted by a consultant, our Altum group, conducted the M&D. It was a copy of the plan is included in your packet. It was circulated for the required 20 days. Staff received very few comments, and those comments were all addressed. So from the M&D, there was mitigation measures that include biology resources, cultural, tribal cultural, and also noise impacts. And Chair, when we're finished, the CEQA consultant will be able to address the commission whenever we call upon them. Other studies that were performed include a traffic analysis, a parking assessment, noise impact analysis, and all those reports were attached to the staff report. The project also went before the Riverside County Airport Land Use Commission, and they did find that the project was consistent with their plans. And also the FAA has reviewed the plans for being that is in an area that's close to the airport runways. So our recommendation is that the Planning Commission recommend to approval the City Council, the General Plan Amendment, the amendment to the Planned Development District, the Major Architectural, and then the draft development agreement. There is a request by the applicant to change one of the conditions of approval relative to the development agreement. And I'm sure we'll come back to it, but it included a discussion of, I will have to find it in just a minute. So, Chair, if we could call in the environmental consultant, I think that would be appropriate now.
Are we going to, if we call in the environmental consultant, are we going to be asking questions of the environmental consultant at the same time?
That could be appropriate.
Okay, then please call the environmental consultant.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, so I'm Thomas Strand with the Altum Group, and we prepared the mitigated negative declaration for the Desert Days project. And as Glenn alluded to, we were able to reduce all the potentially significant impacts to less than significant levels in the areas of biological resources, cultural resources, noise, and tribal cultural resources. The mitigation measures for biological resources generally implement the Migratory Bird Treaty Act requirement to conduct pre-construction bird surveys if the project is in construction during the nesting bird season, which is February 1st, 31st. For cultural resources, there are mitigation measures to contact a qualified archaeologist to evaluate any findings that may occur during ground disturbing activities. And mitigation measure cultural 2 implements the required public resources code section that eludes me at the moment to contact the county coroner in the event that any potentially human remains are found. The noise impacts, the noise mitigation measures, which there are 2 of, address both vibration at nearby sensitive receptors and they address the noise levels to the exterior of the facade. And implementing the mitigation measures as shown in the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and also the initial study show and the noise study show that all the noise level impacts and vibration impacts are reduced to levels below significant. And then the tribal cultural mitigation is associated with contacting the Agua Caliente band of Kuya Indians in the event, rather prior to the issuance of a grading permit. Are there any questions?
Can we have a full screen back? Or maybe I've lost. Oh, it's back. Are there questions? I have a few. Does anybody else have questions?
I have a question for staff, but not of the environmental consultant.
Two of the environmental consultants. I think 2.16, you have no traffic mitigation required. We've just heard from the city engineer that there is traffic mitigation required. If we would accept this, we would have to have that changed.
So that the required, did I cut anybody off?
All you really have to do is confirm that it will have to be changed.
Well, it will. And we document that in the ISMND as a change identified in the general plan.
Glenn, can you speak? I think I'll have you speak to that. I have a couple questions on the nesting birds. The airport requires that birds be discouraged from congregating on the property as a condition of approval. There's a contradiction between the nesting birds and the airport requirements so that birds don't become involved with the motors of the air, get sucked into the airplanes. Is the condition of nesting birds necessary if it conflicts?
Well, it's a condition. I mean, the MND had determined that if there are nesting birds, it doesn't mean that there will always be nesting birds, but if there are, that develop or construction happen in a certain period of time. The ALOC was concerned that if it rains and in the detention basin water collects for more than 24, 48 hours that birds would feel comfortable landing there, and then when a plane takes off, that they would leave and possibly, hit the engines of the plane. So they're very specific about how that detention basin is designed.
So what you're saying is no conflict.
No.
And then at one point, you mentioned that there's no reference and name to who is HACR. It's in the introduction.
I'm sorry, Chair, I'm having difficult hearing you.
In the introduction, there's mention of HACR, but there's no definition as to who they are. It's one of the owners.
Housing Authority of the County of Riverside. Sorry.
Okay, so if we were looking at this, and it's something we have to certify, I would like a couple of changes made if we're going to certify it. One is that the Housing Authority of the County of Riverside be identified, and also that in 22.16, the current traffic mitigation that is going to be required be identified in anything that we certify. You or the consultants have problems with that?
Right, it's already a condition of approval. The traffic light not be there, that it not be part of the design.
No, all I'm saying is I wouldn't certify this if that has changed. I think it has to be certified with that page being changed to match the current requirements.
All right, we'll review, Chair. What I would like to do is, before the applicant and I finish my presentation, we have a fly-through of the project that I would like to take 30 seconds and show you before the applicant, you open it to public hearing, okay? If we could start that.
Yes.
So it's on the screen now. This is Sunrise elevation.
As you go through it, can you identify where you are?
Sure. This is the side that faces the parking lot of the DAP building. The pavilion we're looking at the pavilion now, and this is the Vista Sunrise 2 apartments. Notice the 3 floors. This is the side that faces the parking lot, so it's 3 stories at that point. And this is going inside the complex, and you'll see the different mosaics, the different colors that are proposed, the balcony railings, and the bridges that bridge the complex within internally, and then some of the landscaping. And this is the elevation that faces Sunrise. You'll see that the 2-story is what faces the street, and then it steps back to a 3rd story. And also you'll notice the walls that are along Sunrise and the 25-foot setback. So, Chair, that concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available to take any questions.
Before you finish your presentation and before questions, would you go through phasing? Because that's an important piece of this project so that people know what we're approving and when.
In terms of phasing
of the major architectural.
Right. So the Planning Commission, the whole project hinges upon the general plan amendment change and the expansion of the boundaries of the PD. So those are the first elements that the Planning Commission would need to determine. And then if the Planning Commission makes the findings for those 2 elements, then you can move on to the major architectural. As far as what phases go first, it's my understanding that the Vista Sunrise 2 apartment complex is looking to secure funding in 2021 with possible construction in 2022 or 2023. And they'll go into the reasons why they're asking for a development agreement to extend the usual 2-year entitlements so they can get their funding. And then also the representative from Desert AIDS Project, David Brinkman, he can describe to you the phasing or the anticipated construction and completion of the pavilion.
Just let me go a little further with that question. My understanding is that the project for the pavilion, they're asking for it's 2 years and it's not included in the development agreement, so it'd be a standard 2-year approval. And that includes or does not include the parking structures, the entrance, the revised entranceway, and the retention basin. So just tell us what's included, and then the development agreement, am I correct, concerns the apartment building, and there's 10 years on the apartment building.
Yes, so the development agreement is for asking for 10 years. So, and that is only for the Coachella Valley Housing Authority portion of it. And the city would like them both to be part of the development agreement, but the DAP is evaluating their options. So what would be built? And staff has asked them, and they'll address that in just a minute. If they build the Vista Sunrise 2 apartments, that will include the expansion of the parking lot and the water retention basin and dog park, because that is a requirement for them to retain their on-site water retention. And that would also include the driveway realignments along Vista Chino. So that they would do a lot of the development based upon the anticipation that the pavilion would be built. So the pavilion would have a 2-year regular time period. They may anticipate coming in with a development agreement to extend that, but at this time, they're not ready to commit to that.
So just to go back, pavilion for 2 years and everything else.
For 10, right. And that the pavilion would include the improvements along Sunrise. So they would not do the Sunrise improvements unless they were doing the pavilion, because that's that building specific.
Okay. So we have are there questions, or do we want to reserve questions of staff until we get to, we've heard the applicant? This is a question to the commission.
I'd like to ask a question now, because I think I'll be stuck on it the whole time the applicant is making their presentation.
Then please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Glenn and commissioners, I'm looking at page 9 of the traffic analysis, Exhibit 1-4, Access Alternative 2. Glenn, I believe you said that was the city's preferred choice, right?
Looking it up now. Yes, Alternative 2.
Great. So I'd like to just ask you a couple of questions, if I could. The way I look at it is that the existing median will be shortened. First of all, everything for DAP will be right in, right out along Sunrise Way, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so we're going to shorten the existing median to allow a left turn for going north on Sunrise to enter what is called the central driveway, right? A new little carve out is there, correct?
Yeah, Commissioner, this is Rick with engineering. That left in at that location that you're referring to is currently there now. That location will still stay.
That is still there. So, because I'm looking at Google Earth and it shows a median going past that driveway.
Yeah, there is a turnout in that median. It's difficult to see, but there is a turnout there now.
Okay. So, thank you for that. I appreciate that. My question becomes, with that special housing unit or that apartment building that's going to be built, how does a pedestrian go from that apartment building to Stater Brothers across the street? What is the path for that pedestrian?
They would need to walk north along Sunrise sidewalk to the intersection where there is a controlled pedestrian push button, ped button for that signal.
They'll walk up to Vistacino and then cross over and then walk back down.
Correct.
To the supermarket. And did staff at all examine an alternative that did not have a left entry going north on Sunrise, but instead has a wide median to allow safe harbor for a pedestrian to cross directly to the supermarket, which is how we know human behavior tends to be?
Correct, which we, that type of human behavior we cannot control. But that is not, mid-block crosswalks are not something that the city is very in favor of at all, although we do have some in the city. But it is not something that is a very safe practice to do. This was a much safer condition, even though you do have to walk a little bit further. This is a much safer condition, given the traffic volumes on this road.
I appreciate what you're saying. I have one final question about this. If there was no left entrance for the central driveway going north on Sunrise, if that did not exist, but instead there was only access to the southerly driveway, is that a feasible project design alternative?
I don't believe that works with the project. They need that back of house entrance. That is for deliveries. That's for semis to make their deliveries to the project. And that's something that they were adamant about having.
And so, last question for you, and we'll hear from the applicant, I know that, but I really wanted to hear the engineering perspective and the staff perspective. If there was no left turn at the central driveway going north, was that alternative considered at all in this analysis? What would happen to the project if that was not an option?
If that left turn into that central driveway was not needed by the applicant and was not a requirement, then we would require that be a solid median, that area be filled in. That would be a solid median.
All right. Thanks for your excellent explanation. I appreciate that. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Are there more questions? Let's just do traffic first. Are there more questions on traffic? Commissioner Maruzzi.
I'm just wondering how, when you're inside the complex, let's say you're a resident, how do you go west on Vistacino with your vehicle?
You would not be able to go west on Vistacino. It is a right in, right out only on Vistacino.
So what would be the recommendation for someone who wants to go west, young man?
They would wouldn't they have to go down Vistacino, go out to the Vistacino exit?
They would have to go out the Vistacino exit and do a U-turn at the intersection, at the controlled intersection.
But it's the intersection of Sunrise and Vistacino?
Correct.
Well, they could make a U-turn at that intersection?
Correct.
Okay, so they just have to cross over to the fourth lane.
Or they'd have to go down or turn up Sunrise and somehow go west. I'm sorry, it's a Caltrans controlled intersection, so it's not a city intersection. So I was just informed that they do not have the ability to make a U-turn there.
Yeah, I didn't think so since I got hold of it.
Yeah.
So it's a little complicated for someone trying to go west of Vistacino. I guess we're going to have to figure it out by, making a U-turn further east on Vistacino or head south on Sunrise until you find a street where you can make a right turn. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
More questions on the traffic analysis? Just to get a sense, people are okay with including this analysis as a requirement. Commissioner Lewin.
Well, Madam Chair, I just would like a little guidance from you or the staff then. I disagree with building this housing unit directly across the street from a grocery store and having no viable means for pedestrian crossing. I've seen it in many other areas of the city, and it ends up with pedestrian deaths. And we spend so much time analyzing traffic and vehicular pattern, and sometimes we ignore basic human behavior. So when you ask, are we okay with this? At what point do I say, I think this is a bad design decision, because I think people will absolutely cross Sunrise Way. And I think it's smarter to not have an option to turn left while going north there, and recognize that people, in fact, will walk across the street. Even if we don't encourage it, even if we don't put a crosswalk, they will do it because it's way too far to walk up to Vistacino, cross there, and come back. If you look at the redesigned Ralph's, the old, what used to be Alpha Beta at Sunrise and Talkwitz, is it? Mm-hmm. We have a large residential community across the street and significant problems with people crossing with no safety. And it's going to happen with this, for sure. And we have the opportunity now to recognize it and say, there probably shouldn't be a left turn into the central driveway, because we know people are going to be, against our advice, going to be crossing, and they'll use that center median to stand while traffic becomes safe enough for them to pass.
Why don't we take this under advisement so that there is a sense that there is a concern about this? Okay. And let's go on to other questions of staff. Are there questions, and just taking it, the general plan amendment and the expansion of the PD, are there questions regarding that? Commissioner Hirschbein.
Well, I just like to amplify Commissioner Lewin's concern. I share it, but I don't think it's an either or. Either you get the left turn lane or you get pedestrian safety. We've got smart people figuring this out. I don't want to say it's either or. I would rather have both. How do you get into the project if you're coming down Sunrise from the south? You're heading north on Sunrise, you have to turn left on Vistacino. You can't make a left into the project on Vistacino. You can't make a U-turn. How do you even get in the project? So getting in the project from a vehicular standpoint is important, but so is people crossing to get to the shopping center. I think both are important, and I think we kick it back. I wouldn't be happy approving this without both of those in place. And maybe it's a button-operated crosswalk with flashing lights or something along those lines. But to say that we can't have pedestrian safety and vehicular access, I think it's a low bar. I think we've got to raise the bar on this.
Does staff want to respond to that? I wanted to get a sense of where people were on different items, because there's a lot involved in this project. Glenn, do you have a response?
Well,
do you want to hear our concerns?
It may be good if we could open the public hearing and let the applicant present. They have a slideshow they'd like to do.
Yeah, I think that's partially why I suggested we ask questions after the applicant. And we're getting an echo again. But I'm going to open the public hearing now. Do we have members of the public who wish to testify? And then we'll do questions of both. We'll do questions of the applicant, and then we'll go back to questions of staff.
Madam Chair, we only have the applicant who has requested to speak. No other members of the public have requested to speak.
Then we're opening the public hearing. The applicant has 10 minutes for their presentation, 3 minutes for rebuttal, but we will be asking them questions, so it may go longer than 13 minutes. Is the applicant ready to speak, or members of the team?
Yes, they're at the podium. They're in chamber.
Oh, good.
Waiting for the slide.
If we could have the slides to come up.
And if they could introduce themselves.
All right. Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners, and thank you for having us this evening. I'm David Brinkman, the CEO of Desert AIDS Project for the last 14 years. DAP has recently marked its 37th year of service to the Palm Springs community. And since 1999, we've owned and operated from our campus at Sunrise and Vista Chino. In 2012, we expanded our mission, and we now care for all people, regardless of HIV status. Today, we care for 8,000 patients, 50% of which who do not have HIV. We are their doctors, dentists, psychologists, and social service and housing providers. As we've opened our doors and our hearts wider, patient demand has outpaced our facilities. And in the last several years, we've bought the buildings and the land adjacent to our property. We've opened 2 new health clinics on our campus to date. Our future is doubling our capacity to serve by expanding our dental, behavioral health, and primary care clinics and special needs housing on our campus. Our response to COVID increased our patient population by an additional 4,000 people in the past 8 months. Our need to expand and care for this community has become even more urgent. One of our proven approaches to achieving successful outcomes to people in great need is to provide all of our services on the same campus. In one day, a person can receive food, meet with an addictions counselor, refill a prescription, be seen by a doctor, and meet with a job placement specialist. For the most fragile community members, living in a beautiful yet affordable housing on our campus delivers a quality of life and health outcomes otherwise unattainable. For 14 years, we've successfully housed 80 residents on our campus, and through our partnership with Coachella Valley Housing Coalition, we will house many more. To share more about this critical component of our humanitarian model, on the call tonight is Marianne Ibarra, who's the Director of Multifamily Housing at Coachella Valley Housing Coalition. I do want to say in closing that DAP is currently working on our DA, and we will bring that forward when it's ready. So with that, I'll turn it over to Marianne Ibarra.
Marianne.
Thank you, David. Good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Marianne Ibarra. I am the Director of Coachella Valley Housing Coalition.
Glenn, we're getting bad help.
You're getting an echo?
Yes.
Okay, Marianne, try again.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Marianne Ibarra. I am the Director of Multifamily with Coachella Valley Housing Coalition. The Coachella Valley Housing Coalition is a nonprofit affordable housing developer that is based in India. CVHC was founded in 1982, and since its inception has developed more than 4,900 units of affordable housing throughout Riverside County. 296 of those units were actually built in Palm Springs. CVHC provides housing for farm workers, families, seniors, individuals, and families with special needs, as well as homeless veterans. Through our multifamily department, CVHC has constructed 40 apartment developments for a total of 2,800 units and is currently in closing process to begin construction on a 100-unit apartment development in India. Through our single-family department, we've created over 2,000 homeownership opportunities through its mutual self-help program and currently has 61 self-help homes in construction in Desert Hot Springs and in Imperial County. In addition to developing housing, CVHC also provides an array of services at its affordable housing developments. Some of these services include childcare, after-school programs, computer training, ESL classes, and we also provide college scholarships to students who live in our apartment developments through our JFM Scholarship Fund. In partnership with the Desert Ace Project, CVHC will develop and construct 61 units of permanent supportive housing. The housing, I apologize, the units will be housed by individuals with chronic illnesses and homeless individuals. The rents for these units will be set at 30 to 60% of area median income, meaning rents for studio units would range from $396 to $660 a month, and the one-bedroom units would range from $424 to $706 per month. Individuals will need to earn from $15,840 to $26,400 annually for studio apartments and $18,090 to $30,150 for a one-bedroom apartment. CVHC received an award of 29 Section 8 vouchers for the County of Riverside to assist homeless individuals. The 1,600 square foot community building that will be built as part of the development will provide ample space to provide resident services to the residents. Some of the services that are planned for this development include computer training, culinary classes, dietary classes, and health information and awareness programs. All of these services will be provided free of charge to the residents. The project will be built to Greenpoint rated standards. Each unit will include energy-efficient appliances, and the project will be managed by a third-party management company with oversight by the Coachella Valley Housing Coalition. Financing structures for the project will include a waiver of city impact fees, no place like home funds that will be provided by the state of California, 9% tax credits, and a request of the city of Palm Springs was made for financing for the development. We anticipate applying for tax credits in July of 2021. And if awarded, we will begin with construction in March of 2022. This site for this development is in a great location because it is close to a lot of amenities that these tenants will be able to utilize, such as a bus stop, grocery store, medical clinic, pharmacy, banks, restaurants, and convenience shopping. All of these amenities are within walking distance of the site, and I believe they're all within a quarter mile of the site. That concludes my portion of the presentation, and we'll now hand this over to our architect, Rule Young. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marianne. Is this mic on? And
yes.
Am I controlling? I am. Let's try that. Okay. Do you have that cool thing that highlights? Whoa. Okay. That doesn't count in my 3 minutes. And I will answer every one of those questions that came up beforehand. Thank you, Marianne. My name is Rule Young. I'm with Interactive Design Corporation. We're the architects. And I'll give a brief overview of the design team's approach to this project. I'm going to be talking about the built environment and how it responds to three big picture issues. One is the if I can make this, I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. One is the public realm, the streetscape. The second is once I'm on the campus, is there clarity and comfort? And the third, how to create community and security for the residents. Those are the three big issues, and I'll try to explain how we address them. So let's talk about Sunrise Facade. As you saw in the drive-through, the buildings that are there are very distinctly different. And we wanted to introduce a way of unifying the distinct differences. So we introduced two major architectural issues that are add-ons as opposed to takeaways. We did not want to do a great deal of deconstruction. So we introduced, oops, wrong one. We introduced horizontal louvers that in some cases are visual cues and in some cases are shade and a protection for a walkway. Additionally, we added a series of horizontal blade roofs. Both of these are an attempt to bring some modern visual cues to the architecture that spans 40 years in terms of its existence. The next issue, on campus. The question is clarity. How do I get there? Where's the front door? How am I greeted? So initially we said, oh darn, we said we're going to create a new single front door that links the two buildings, the annex and the existing. But before that, even before that, we introduced a series of freestanding arbors within the parking lot to greet people as they're coming across the parking lot, and repurposed and redesigned the park into an amenity for staff, residents, and clients. The vocabulary on this side, the west facing, again picks up the horizontal louvers along this way, freestanding shade arbors, and a visible, transparent, public front door with the horizontal blade roofs providing shade at two different layers and horizontal louvers because of the west-facing sun. This front door now brings to the central registration and distribution within the building to all the services that DAP provides. Lastly, we have, not in importance, but in this presentation, we have the apartment complex. Now, it's very obvious that the apartments are a different building type. And whereas the DAP building had a front door that was transparent and bold, in this case, the apartments open off of shared courtyards, so that the sense of community and inward-looking security was, inward-looking connection was part of the program. Additionally, we had to create a connection for the residents to the DAP building. So enhanced crosswalk, the public realm, the apartment for the manager and the resident manager is there directly across from the walkway to the front door of DAP. Yeah, that shows the, oh. So those were entries and crosswalks. Let's get to the next. So obviously I didn't sync this with these sophisticated slides. You see the crosswalk into the park and across to DAP. There. Now, the architecture of the building is obviously different than the existing structures and is based upon simple forms, simple off-white plaster walls with accent stacked windows and color panels, and the horizontal blade roof. What's important here is that the building is set back twice as far as the adjacent building here. It's at 25 feet versus 13 feet. It's also two-story at sunrise, with the third story stepping back along this entry drive. Okay. I think that's the last slide. I think my time is up, and I'm very willing to answer other questions more specific about the architecture and the development. And I believe, Nicole Christ from Terra Nova would like to also address the commission. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Nicole Christ. I'm with Terra Nova Planning and Research, and I've been assisting with the processing of this application for DAP and CVHC. I would like to address some of the the commissioner's questions regarding the traffic and bird contradictions and phasing. The traffic analysis and the initial study considered both the signal option and the right in, right out, left in option. Both of them were operated on acceptable levels, and there is not mitigation required for one option or the other. That is covered in the conditions of approval. The initial study determined that the levels of service and the traffic flow would be adequate under either alternative as indicated in the traffic study. The ALUX bird requirement is, as Glenn indicated, tied to their congregating if water stands in the retention basin and park. That's a little odd for the desert, but ALUC is in Riverside, and I guess they get more water than we do. So they had a concern that we would be creating a bird pond. We have demonstrated to them that our drainage basin drains in less time than their maximum, and therefore we will not attract birds, and that was part of their finding when they made the determination. The Mbta bird analysis that's required is a standard mitigation you see in many of your initial studies, and that is so as not to disturb birds who may be nesting in trees that will be removed by construction. So it is a short-term analysis and does not affect the long-term operation of the site. There was a comment made, there were several comments regarding traffic and circulation. A few things I would like to clarify, and then I'd be glad to answer further questions about traffic as you have your discussion. We do not expect semi-deliveries. The deliveries that DAP currently gets are panel trucks, UPS, the fine food truck that helps to supply the depot. We do not expect semi-trucks. We do need a left turn in. There is currently a left turn in slightly north of our new proposed driveway. That is going to be converted to a service entry only and will have little or no activity. But because of the volume of traffic that's generated by the project, the left in is required, or there is an impact on the intersection at Vistacino and Sunrise because people have to go around to make only right access. As regards the pedestrian crossing, we would be willing to take on a condition for a flashing. There are several options for flashing pedestrian signals. If staff is inclined to allow us to do that, that was part of the consideration for the traffic signal option, was to provide pedestrian crossing. We do understand the city's concern about putting a signal so close to Vistacino and Sunrise, and frankly, because both entities are nonprofit organizations, the cost of a signal was of concern to both entities, which is why we headed for the option of the right in, right out, left in. I think I've addressed most of the commissioner's questions, and as I said, I'm glad to answer any other questions you may have. Thank you.
Is that your entire presentation?
Yes, that's them. That's their 10 minutes, yes.
Okay, so at this point, it's time, and again, we're getting an echo. It's time for questions of the applicant, and then we'll go to questions of staff. So questions of the applicant. Commissioner Maruzzi.
Just a quick question. I want to better understand the traffic impact. So were you saying that because one can make a left into that service driveway, that leads to there being no traffic impact, even though that driveway is not usable for the public? In other words, had it not been for that ability to make that left turn into that driveway that's not usable for the public, there would have been a significant impact.
It's a question of Nicole.
Commissioner Maruzzi, if that's what I said, that is not what I intended to say. What I was using the existing driveway as a comparison or equivalent. We have a current, the driveway that is going to be the service driveway is currently the main entry for the complex between the annex and the existing DAP building. It is right in, right out, left in. We are proposing to move that condition to our new main driveway, southerly. And because of the number of trips that DAP and the residential project generate, it is necessary to have the left in as well. That does not preclude a pedestrian signal if the city wants to consider that as an addition.
So can one heading north on Sunrise make a left into the new southerly driveway?
Into our new main driveway.
Main driveway?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
and that satisfies the issue, the impact issue aspect. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Lewin.
Madam Chair, it's less a question and more a statement of appreciation that the applicant, DAP, and the housing group are willing to consider pedestrian safety for the new housing development. And I'll talk with the commissioners later, but I thank them for signaling their willingness to accommodate that.
Other questions? Then I have some, and it would, I'm sorry, Commissioner Irvin?
Yeah, I wanted to just ask if the applicant talked with the community and spoke with the community in regards to the color of the buildings.
Yes, sir. We held, CVHC held multiple community meetings with the neighborhood during the design process. And the latest one was this summer. And they did mention the color issue to us during the discussion in that meeting. And we have addressed it and will continue to address it through the final PD process.
And Commissioner Irvine, if I could state that the public hearing required notice sent to within 500 foot of all residences, and there were over 600 letters that were mailed to current residents or property owners. Also, there were letters that we received in the past day that were emailed to the commission. So you have received some correspondence via email from residents. So some have been for the project and against.
Okay.
And one of the letters from the community group did say that they've dealt with the color issue. That was the last letter we got from the community group. I have some questions about phasing, and they go to the development agreement. So I'm not sure who should answer it. But the question, there are a number of major architecturals, and I want to understand what's going to be built when. And I understand that as we're doing this, we're approving the architecture for the entire development. But the only approvals I see that have a 2-year timeline on them have to do with the annex. Which of the approvals would we anticipate seeing within the 10 years under the development agreement, and which are we looking at for a 2-year approval as a regular major architectural?
Madam Chair, the CVHC is likely to go first. They would develop 2021, as Marianne indicated, 2021 and 2022, with opening likely end of 2022 or beginning of 2023. In order for them to develop, they're required to drain to the retention basin. So the retention basin and dog park would be part of that phase, as would the new driveway, which is an existing access point that would be widened and improved on their side, and the dock would be added with DAP. So there would be a 2-way driveway in. The residents turn left into the apartments. DAP clients would continue straight through to the parking lot. The phase 2 will be let me back up. CVHC will also be responsible for making improvements on Sunrise for their frontage. So from that southerly driveway to their southerly property line, and the merging back into the Sunrise alignment, because that alignment is not straight, at their southern corner. DAP's improvements would, at this point, would it be expected to come second, and they would include the lengthening of the Vista Chino Sunrise northbound to Vista Chino westbound turn pockets, as well as the Sunrise frontage, the Vista Chino landscape improvements, and all of the interior improvements to the central parking lot, as well as the pavilion building itself.
So let me ask the question then. Doesn't it make sense, even though CVHC might go in 2021, 2022, but they also may go later if they get the tax credit allocation in a different cycle? Is that correct?
Yes, and that is part of the reason we originally asked for 6 years for the entitlements. The city attorney in his review pointed out that if the development agreement is for a 10-year period, the entitlements extend for the period of the development agreement. That's where the 10 years came from. If the funding for CVHC is delayed, if the funding for CVHC goes well, the process may be done in 3 years, but that 2-year window was of concern. DAP depending on their funding, may or may not be done in 3 years, more likely a longer period. I would argue that the development agreement, because the entitlements are for the entire site, that if the council approves the development agreement for CVHC, because that vests the major architectural review, the PD, and the general plan amendment for a period of 10 years for CVHC, it would do the same for DAP, but that would be a question that I intend to ask the city attorney between now and the city council meeting, because we have been rushed in finalizing the development agreement.
So it would make sense for what your timeline looks like for us as we look at the development agreement to assume that both entities may be a party to a development agreement that has a longer timeline.
Parties would like the longer timeline.
The parties would like the longer timeline.
Yes.
Okay, because I can't see how you can do this without that.
But with extensions, we do have the power to extend, but we have limitations on extensions, and that's why we included the time period in the development agreement.
And then the staff has not yet agreed on the development agreement applying to both entities, or the city has?
Staff would prefer that both come in together.
Thank you.
And wait, Kathy, hang on. We need a mic on. Go ahead. There you go.
Madam Chair, DAP is considering how to proceed with the development agreement. There are considerations in the funding because of prevailing wage requirements, and so they're looking at the financials right now. But we would expect that DAP will follow with some kind of agreement with the city. The reason for the bifurcation is that CVHC, because of the funding cycles, needs to get this process done by the end of the year, with applications due at the beginning of 2021. And so that's why we bifurcated the two.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I've got a couple of different questions. One is to CVHC or possibly to Desert AIDS project. Understanding the funding with 29 project-based certificates and 61 units. Some of the units may be priced higher than the special needs population you're looking at. And I'm wondering about the designation of all of the units as special needs if you can't get vouchers for them, or the rentals might go as high as 60% of area median. How do you handle that, or should we look at those units as special needs if you get additional vouchers?
We are planning to apply for additional vouchers if we can obtain them, but none of the units will be above 50% of area median income. We've already structured our operating budgets to show that the project will cash flow with units at 50% of median income and below. That's all I'm saying.
And do you think that at 50% of area median, you could qualify somebody who's handicapped, say developmentally disabled or homeless or HIV, So the real question is how do you qualify those people at 50% of area median? How do you get them in?
Well, that's where we would have to do our marketing, and we do have a third-party marketing management company who will work with us to do the marketing to market those units at those levels. They will then check all incomes and stuff, and folks would have to make the specific income in order to apply or to qualify. Qualify.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
The next question is to the architect, if he's there.
Yes, he's approaching the podium.
Yes.
First of all, I have very modest questions to you because I think you've done an exquisitely beautiful job with this. But there are two modest questions. One is the decomposed granite in the dog park. I've worked on a couple of dog parks in my life, including where I live and also in Santa Monica, where I used to live, and I was on the planning commission. And the ones that had decomposed granite didn't have dogs coming to visit it because owners don't like their dogs coming back with it running through the granite. Have you given consideration to more grass at the base of that rather than the DG?
I'll give you a modest answer, which is that I'm not an expert on that. I was present during the discussion with the landscape architect. The issue of decomposed granite, drainage, pickup of poop, and grass. There were three variables that were discussed, and truthfully, I cannot adequately answer whether this was the optimal ratio, but I know that it had to do with drainage of the retention, water detention, as well as hygiene in terms of DG versus the grass. That's what I recall. And Jeremy, who is the landscape architect, I could punt to him so that you might get a better answer. Are you there, Jeremy? Franzini, yes, Jeremy Franzini. Do you want to give me the second one, see if I can handle that?
The other one was, there were some comments from AAC that, and I think the entrance changes you've made on Sunrise are exquisite. There were comments from AAC, I believe, that the entrance to the pavilion was a bit underwhelming. And I was wondering if you had thought about those comments and what your thought on that is.
We have thought about it. And in fact, there were two issues that came up around entrances. One was on Sunrise itself in the annex. The existing annex building has a bold copper roof that's angled and sloping to the south. And on the west side, we're pulling that back. At the AAC, there was a comment that said, why don't you take it off on the front as well? The issue that comes up with that are twofold. Number one, it's an extraordinarily expensive gesture to remove something that's already there and not add any occupiable space. Secondly, if we did that, we would be responsible for engineering the solution on the rest of the building because we'd be disturbing the integrity of this high building roof and the rest. We did not want to touch that. So we introduced the lower horizontal blade to bring shade and a sense of pedestrian scale and take away the vastness or what we felt was out of proportion facing Sunrise. On the back side, the quote was uninspiring, I think. We deliberately used steel columns with a secondary horizontal blade roof and a higher one above that because we wanted it to be transparent. Transparent and imposing are two different approaches. We wanted the welcoming, open view and felt that that was communicating a value of DAP. So that we do consider those issues. We deliberately made the decision for both aesthetic and communication of values. So I also want to raise one other issue that came up, and that was that the freestanding arbors are designed differently than the entry architecture and louvers. That was deliberate. We wanted it to be a little more playful. So it's not a horizontal roof, it's an angled roof. We did some little cool, what we thought were cool things. They didn't think it was cool. The implication was it should be the same as the building. We don't agree with that. We think they are freestanding. They are in the vocabulary, but not identical.
So that leads to the question of, did you agree with the AAC conditions? And it looks like you don't agree with the elimination of the copper roof and the comment about the entry. Was there anything else you didn't agree with in the AAC comments?
I'm trying to recall, honestly. Those were the two that I can remember. I think, yeah, those are the two. There was a question about the color. One of the issues that we wanted to do was to bring a more contemporary color palette to both the existing DAP and the annex building, which are both in the, you know, the beige, bland, bland, inoffensive. Now, we don't want to offend, but we want to bring contemporary quality of a, I think there's a color that is dove white or something of that nature. It's a neutral off-white, and we want that to be the unifying component between the apartments and the buildings. Let's see. AAC reconsider parking lot shade selection. That'll be Jeremy. Lighting plan was to be resubmitted. They were concerned about exposure on the southwest corner to the single-family residences, and those fixtures are already there. We aren't changing them. The canopy structures to be restudied for consistency with detailing. Detailing, yes, but form, no. We want to have that lightness that isn't so orthogonal, I guess. Color samples, yep, we'll do that. Applicant, investigate gating the service driveway. That is not practical because there's no turnaround. It will only be used, we will use a landscape and other visual cues that say don't turn in here. But it is for service of the emergency generator, service of trash, and postal delivery. Copper roof on annex building shall be restudied. We did restudy it, but we don't want to change it. Improve access, land fencing, investigative refinement on the dog park feature. I'm not qualified. Landscaping on Sunrise, we fully agree with that.
Jeremy's on the line now.
Jeremy is on the line, so,
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'll start by answering the question on the dog park surface. As you know, if you've designed or worked on dog parks, the surface is the biggest discussion item that happens with dog parks. And we looked at the different alternatives, and obviously we do look at using a natural grass or turf, however you would like to call it. But we find that for that to really be successful, you need to have a much larger sized dog park. There's just too much activity with dogs, especially at entrance and exit points, that the grass just has very little chance of survival. just because of the pause and the compaction you get from the grass. So that's why we had to look at the decomposed granite. We did actually try to have a few little grass pockets out there, though, underneath the trees, so they'd get a little bit more shade underneath the tree, and then we could have a combination of grass and decomposed granite. But to try to do the whole surface in natural grass, we just felt was going to be an unsuccessful solution due to the size of the dog park.
How many dogs did you anticipate would be there?
Well, that's a great question. The thing is we know that we've got the existing apartment buildings, and then we're going to be adding the new apartments with this project. So, we didn't do a dog survey per se, other than walking around and seeing several people with dogs during some of our site walks. But it is a very, so just to be clear also, when you look at that detention basin, I don't know if we can bring it up, only half of it is available for the dog park. The other half is not going to be accessible by people and animals. So you really got, if you look at that whole basin, it's really half of that basin size, and it's just not a very big area.
Okay, I've gotten your answer. I might not agree with all of it, but I agree that a dog park the size of the city's dog park, with the number of dogs they have, turf is hard. I would assume you'd have a much smaller population there. And it partially it depends on a survey of what you have. But thank you for your answers. I've taken a lot of questions. Does anybody else have questions of the applicant? There being none, let's close the public hearing and see if we can take this piece by piece in terms of the decisions we have to make. Glenn, can you go through the items that we decide?
Yes, certainly.
And then we'll take comments on them, and then we'll go through them one by one.
So the first action would be to amend the general plan to modify the land use from medium density residential and public quasi-public to mixed use multi-use.
That's before the commission. Is there any concern about that, or can I get a sense of agreement or disagreement? Commissioner Maruzzi.
Yeah, I just want to understand, what are the negatives from approving this? There must be some. Does anyone here who has more experience with some of these designations? I'm just not, I have no opinion on, because I don't really see the reason why we would not approve this.
Right. So there are findings that the Planning Commission needs to make in order to recommend approval to the City Council that the general plan amendment be voted on. So one is is it compatible with the mixed use, multi-use? Yes, it'll be both residential and commercial medical office. Are there potential adverse impacts to future development in the vicinity? There won't be. There are, this will be like the final piece of the corner. There's not much development that could happen. Are there any potential adverse impacts to future development in the area? And we believe that the Planning Commission can make that finding that there will not be adverse impacts to any future development within that area.
Just to speak, I don't see any drawbacks to making this finding. We have multiple uses in this area. We know that the mixture of medical and housing works. Commissioner Hirschbein.
I'll move to approve.
Yeah, I don't want to vote on this. I want to get a sense that we're going to.
All right, then I won't move to approve.
Okay. I want to get a sense from us that we are going to include this in the motion that we make. My sense is that we can include this with no exceptions, and we can make these findings. Could I just see a thumbs up or thumbs down? It's all thumbs up. Okay, the next one is the amendment to the general plan. Glenn, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
The next one is the amendment to the planned development district. So what this will do is expand the PD boundaries to include the entire 13.2 acre campus, and then establish development parameters that include the setback on the residential building at 25 feet and then the building height at 30 feet. So in your staff report, there's a resolution that has findings also that staff believes that the Planning Commission can make based upon, is it consistent with the general plan? Is it suitable for the permitted uses? Is there adequate access? Is the parcel the correct size? Does the establishment of the PD, is it necessary and proper, and is it not likely to be detrimental to adjacent property or residences? And staff believes that the findings based upon the environmental assessment and also the underserved housing that this residential will serve makes it necessary for the neighborhood.
And just speaking, Commissioner Maruzzi, yes.
I just want clarification on the building heights. Page 31 of 55 of this, it says 33 feet, and another one says 34.6 for the top of the stair tower. Something was pointed out by one of the letters.
Right. So the building height, the floor or the roof is at 30 feet, and then parapets and other mechanical features can extend above that.
So when determining height of a building, you don't include the parapet?
We don't include the parapet. We include the floor plate of the roof.
So if you had a 4 foot or 5 foot high parapet to hide mechanical equipment, you include that.
Mechanical equipment like elevator shafts and parapets can extend above the height.
So if you had air conditioners all along the roof and you had a parapet that was disguising those, that would include.
Right, within reason, we would evaluate it.
Okay, thanks.
You're muted.
The only two changes that we're making in the PD relate to the affordable housing in terms of greater height than would normally be allowed and a slightly shorter setback. Is that correct?
That's correct, and also that the density calculation will be based upon the 13 acres and not the 1 acre parcel for the residents.
And to me, all three of those go toward our goal of increasing affordable housing, and especially for this population.
Yes, correct.
And it would be supported by state law, and it's also one of the reasons that you do a PD is to allow a combining of uses and getting something that is of benefit to the public. Is there a general sense that people would support the amendment to the general plan? Can I get thumbs up?
Okay. The amendment to the PD.
PD.
Right, PD. Sorry. So we've got the general plan amendment and the amendment to the PD. At this point, and should we vote on those two so that they're firm? And before we take up the major architecture?
Right. The resolution is written as all three of them together, but you could One needs to go, they need to go together in order to do the major architectural.
Okay, so we'll work on the major architectural next.
Right, so that request is, as you mentioned, or we discussed, to include the 18,000 square foot addition to connect the DAP building and the annex, to include site and landscape improvements and the construction of the Vista Sunrise 2 61-unit special needs apartment building, includes the reconfiguration of the retention basin in the dog park, and also traffic improvements along Sunrise.
So what we have a couple of issues in that. I'm assuming that we don't have many issues regarding the architecture. Can I get a feel for what we have?
I'd like to make a comment on the landscape architecture, which is I'd like to see shade trees along Sunrise. The landscaping along Sunrise seems a little thin to me, and I'd like to, we talked about that with the previous applicant on the assisted living. And I'd like to see it mirrored here on Sunrise, that we get shade trees along that edge.
Keep in mind that a final PD will come back to the Planning Commission and AAC. So that could be a condition that the landscape plan be reviewed.
Absolutely. I'd like to see that as a condition. Well, and then the other thing I'd like to bring up is Commissioner Lewin's point about the pedestrian crossing. How do we get that into the resolution?
We do. They said they would do a pedestrian crossing. We agree that there's a requirement for the extension of. We agree with. Let's see if I can find the page.
Well, I'm not talking about the stuff the state's going to require as far as the turn lane.
No. This isn't the state. The city was requiring one of the exhibits, and that would be in the major architectural.
Are you talking about the alternate 2, exhibit 1-4?
So we would probably include alternate 2 and a flashing pedestrian crossing.
Right. Well, I don't know about a flashing. I'm thinking maybe there's actually it stops traffic. I'd leave that. I don't know. What do you think, Commissioner Lewin?
May I speak, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
I think you nailed it, Mr. Hirschbein, that we know what we want, but the experts should figure it out. I would word it this way, that we would approve the major architectural application with the requirement for enhanced pedestrian safety for passage from Vista Sunrise 2 to the Stater Brothers Shopping Center, with attention to the median and nighttime visibility. Do you see what I'm doing there? Is saying with special attention to the median and nighttime visibility, leaving it up to the experts to determine whether that means an illuminated area or a flashing area or whatever. There's a lot of rules that go into how you do that, but it is incumbent upon us to call out that we think there needs to be pedestrian safety.
In the vicinity of that central driveway?
Yes. Yeah. And they can figure out the exact spot.
Just so you're aware, the engineering office has considered that specific option regarding a protected, or I shouldn't say protected, like a flashing light pedestrian movement crosswalk along Sunrise Way, but it has been rejected because of the safety concerns relative to the volume of traffic, the speed at which traffic travels on this road. And the result then basically is that the alternative would be that a traffic light be installed.
Commissioner Lewin.
I've definitely encountered this a number of times. There's There's often, it seems that there's no solution. I think it's our job to say that there needs to be one. And it's not always a flashing light. It's not always a stoplight. Sometimes it's as simple as making a cut in the median so that people can traverse and having a proper street light in there that's illuminating. And that can cut down a lot of deaths without putting an artificial block to traffic. And so that's why I was suggesting language that said enhance pedestrian safety with attention to the median and night lighting. Because when I first got on council, we were told almost nothing could be done. And now we see the city has become a lot safer for pedestrians. And it came about from groups like this commission repeatedly saying, I don't know the answer, but I know that we need to find one for something like this. So if in fact it's unlawful to do something to enhance pedestrian safety, we'll have to accept it. But I think we should put a condition still that says we would like enhanced pedestrian safety at that point.
I'm in agreement with that. I think we have agreement. We have thumbs up on that language.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I might just recommend that it would be that the commission strongly recommends that be studied, because it ultimately has to be approved by our traffic consultant and traffic engineer. And so whatever the means are to get there, I think we can evaluate and look at the potential options to achieve the condition that you're recommending.
Are you comfortable with that?
I am, yes, I am. I don't know if Mr. Hirschfein is.
Everybody else?
I kind of like to see what they come back with, but generally, yeah.
Okay. Then as we're looking at the rest of the architecture, I would, I don't want to just say that the landscape plan comes back to us. I do want to say that we suggest that when the landscape plan comes back to us, there are trees along, shade trees along.
Sunrise?
Sunrise, yes.
Okay.
And I would like to eliminate some of the AAC conditions because the lighting plan has been submitted. I don't think we need number 2. We don't need the service driveway because that's not going to happen, and we don't need the copper roof. So I would just leave reconsider parking lot shade tree selection, design details for the canopy structures. I'm not sure restudied, but, and then color samples. I would leave those 3 in. And for the landscape plan to come back. Are people in agreement on that? Good. Okay. So is there anything else on the major architectural? I'd like them to consider more turf. I actually don't believe we'll have a large number of dogs, and to consider more turf in the dog park.
I'll go with that.
Okay. And I think we have beautiful designs. I don't want to suggest they change I want to let them go with the colors they want to go with. Usually playful works nicely. Is that a thumbs up?
Personally, I love the project as designed, so.
Yes.
And Madam Chair, that leaves the development agreement. So it's a draft development agreement, and you will recommend to the to the city council on the 2 items, the 10-year time for the entitlements, and then the possible fee exemptions.
I would recommend both of those. I would recommend to the city council that they give serious consideration if they need to do separate development agreements, but I would give serious consideration to a development agreement for both the housing portion and the annex portion. I don't think we want to have this project fall on timelines. I don't know what anybody else says on that. Commissioner Lewin?
I agree.
Well, there seemed to be some concern that the development agreement, I'm trying to impute this, the development agreement might take longer to finalize with the city than the housing people want because they need something to get their financing in place. I'm inclined to let those parties figure out what they want rather than imposing our will on it, because there's some process issues that I'm not in the weeds on, but it sounds like they've studied quite closely and they're responding to those concerns.
Well, I think what I would suggest is that if the city needs to just give them an entitlement and then work on the development agreement so they can move forward and get their financing, that they do whatever is expeditious for the project.
Yeah, exactly.
Chair, it's important that they have a development agreement go forward to the city council.
I would recommend, so we recommend that the development agreement go forward to the city council, but that the council work with them on timelines so that they can work on their funding.
That would be, yes, that would be sufficient. Mm-hmm.
Anybody else on this one? We have a complete motion. Would someone like to make it?
I'll move approval as stated by the chair.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Hurd. Roll call. Oh, do you have sufficient information on the motion to be able to go forward? Do you need any clarity from us?
Yes, staff has, the Planning Commission has been able to make the findings for all four elements, and then we do have the specific requests for the major architectural that include alternate 2 and study a pedestrian crossing, trees along Sunrise Way, eliminate AAC conditions number 2, 5, and 6, and then more turf in the dog park.
Glenn, did you mention the shade trees along Sunrise? You did? Okay.
And then a full landscape plan. Will we get a full landscape plan back at final?
You will get a full landscape plan plus building architectural more than what you see now. This will be ready for construction when it comes back.
Fine. Shall we call the roll? Does anybody want to say anything first?
I'll say thank you to DAP for their continued service to the community, and these guys, they're visionaries there. I've watched it for decades now unfold into something wonderful for the community. Very glad to have it.
Anyone else?
And I'll say something that doesn't have anything to do with the topic, but Chair Warmick, what I found out is every time that you speak, when Chambers is still on, that's what creates the echo. So if the Chambers could not be on when you're speaking, it won't have the echo.
Glenn is not quick enough on the button. I keep seeing the red light go on and off. He needs to pay more attention to that.
It's getting to me a little bit, the echo.
I just want to say I've never seen a PD application that was this lovely, this easy to approve, and this beneficial to the community. It's really, really well done, and thank you very much.
And I'd like to say that the mitigated neg deck, the whole initial study was extremely well done. I read the whole thing since that's what I used to do, and I was very impressed by it. So thanks.
Oh, we have to approve the neg deck too, don't we?
Yes, you recommend approval to the city council, plus you can adopt it yourself.
We'll do that next. We'll do this first, and then we'll do the neg deck.
You can make it part of your motion to recommend approval of the M&D.
I would recommend, see if it's acceptable to the makers of the motion to recommend approval of, with the neg deck, with an update to section, I think, 2.1, with, that it indicates that a traffic mitigation was required and what it is.
That friendly amendment is acceptable to me to include the mitigated negative declaration as you described, including the modifications.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Yes.
Okay, can we call the roll?
Commissioner Lewin?
Yes.
Commissioner Hirschbein?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner, oh, she's recused. Vice Chair Maruzzi?
Yes.
Chair Wermuth?
Yes, with pleasure.
Great.
The motion passed unanimously. Okay. Moving right along. Planning Commission reports, requests, and comments. Any? As Maria comes back, beautiful job, Maria. Commissioner Lewin.
I just wanted to thank you for making the suggestion that the vote be called first with the motion maker and the seconder, and then, because it has been a little bit of a burden on alphabetically advantaged people, you know, and I think it was just a very elegant solution that you came up with, so thank you for suggesting that.
I just wanted to say that we are doing, City Council is doing additional outreach to several communities regarding the general plan priorities and goals, or vision statement and priorities. And the second of those is going to be with the Chamber tomorrow. I don't know if the deputy, is it deputy or assistant director, would like to talk about that in his report.
Yes, certainly. Unless, if we're ready to move on to that, I'm happy to give the report. So the general plan vision and priorities, as Madam Chair has stated, we are still doing work behind the scenes, getting additional outreach on that portion of the general plan update. So we continue work on that, and we're doing some outreach currently to some of the business organizations in the city. And so we do have a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce tomorrow morning to present the vision and priorities as recommended by the Planning Commission. And then that feedback will put together, as well as a couple of other meetings we have scheduled with, one being the Downtown Main Street organization, as well as the general managers meeting with the various hoteliers and tourism organizations. So that's outreach that we continue to do in the process. Meanwhile, we also are doing work on each of the chapters that we're updating internally. We're continuing to look at the current goals and policies in each chapter, doing some of the legwork for the safety element that we're looking at. We're pretty much done with our vulnerability assessment and climate adaptation work. So we're moving that along as well. So we do continue to do work. We do continue to recommend people sign up for updates at psjournalplan.com. And obviously stay interested in this process, because it's, although it's a long process, it's obviously a very important process for the city. So that's kind of the final comment I have on that, unless there's anything else, there's questions on that.
The only other one is that the two city councilors who are working on it, Mayor Kors and Councilor Woods, were very interested in a piece that Commissioner Lewin wrote regarding additional shade trees in the city and a priority for that. So I believe that's going to be included in the work that's done. Thank you for that. Yep.
Chair Warmick, is the steering committee still meeting?
They're meeting as there's work for them to do. I think the next meeting is sometime in December, but the consultants do a good deal of work and staff in between meetings, so the meetings aren't frequent.
Oh, okay. And then how are they choosing the communities to have conversations with?
City Council was much broader when they suggested this. I think the first outreach has been done to the business community. And Commissioner Lewin?
Sorry about that. I failed to mute again. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you for all the work you've done and staff. I was wondering, and it's probably far down the road, but at what point, if ever, will we be looking at our zoning maps to conform to the vision that is the general plan? When does that happen?
So that would happen once we get through the general plan update process. We do have some funds available to do some of that work budgeted as a part of the general plan update. So we are evaluating some of that right now. And then ultimately, the work plan or work program after we get through the general plan update is really to ensure that we have consistency with our zoning to our general plan.
Well, I think that'll be even more exciting for all of us who want to nerd out on this, because we need the maps to conform to the general plan, or it's just a document on a shelf. And I will look forward to that. And I'm sure our chair will make sure that happens as well.
It is also a funding question, and our assistant director, I believe, has been raising funds to do some of that work. And thank you to him.
Is there a place for us to weigh in on that, or understand what the trade-offs are, or what the possibilities are?
Possibly we could have a discussion about that at one of our future meetings.
I'd be very interested if we could.
And so we can, I can discuss that with both David and Flynn. The other thing that I would love the assistant director to report on is the tower market.
Certainly. So as I think a few of you may have saw at the meeting on November 12th last week, the council reviewed the tower market application on San Rafael and Indian. They had a number of recommendations for the applicant to consider. And so the staff is working with the applicant to address those items, and that item will return to the council on December 10th.
But there is a committee that's been formed to work on that with council members Garner and Woods, correct? They're with staff.
Correct. That's correct.
Has that meeting occurred?
Not yet.
All right, thanks.
The council had some of the same issues that we did regarding how to require that the project provides food in a way that was significant. and it functioned to some extent as a grocery store. And that's what the discussion centered on, I believe.
And I think also the idea that there'd be some way to, I don't know if guarantee is the right word, but that the business model doesn't shift within 6 months or a year or something because they find that they can't, make
Right.
enough with the produce.
A community trust issue, yes.
And I believe they proposed a SNAP model with 50%.
Yep.
Correct. Yeah, that's the direction that council has given.
Is there anything else? I've sort of included you, but the assistant planning director's report.
So I think you've covered a bunch of the things I wanted to. The only other thing that I want to bring up is, so our next meeting is scheduled for December 9th. We have a number of items scheduled for that meeting. So as far as options go, we might look at doing a second meeting to not make our December 9th meeting last until midnight, if the commission is open to it. The dates that I've looked at on the calendar that might work for staff, and I wanted to get some of your feedback on these, would be either December 8th or December 17th. December 8th is the day before your regular business meeting, which would be on the Tuesday, or the 17th is on the Thursday of the following week.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Assistant Director, would starting at 4 o'clock like we did today help in doing it in one day? How many cases are we looking at?
The direction we've received from council is that we actually do not start earlier than 5:30. So we don't plan on starting earlier for the next meeting. As far as the business that we have, at this point, we are looking at 5 public hearings and a few other items of business.
I can do either of those 2 days.
Is the virgin replacement project one of them? One of the agenda items?
Which project was that?
The virgin replacement project, is that on there?
Yes, that's tentatively on the agenda.
It'll take a while.
My preference would be to actually do it on the 17th, so we have some gap. But if the majority would like to do it on the 8th, I will be forced to. No.
I'm free in either of those. I'll leave it the rest of you.
I would prefer that as well, the gap, simply because these hours, that's when my children need me the most. So back to back leaves my wife 2 days in a row taking care of all the children. And so a week space would help, but I could do either day as well.
I can do either day, and I prefer the gap if that works for everyone.
Mr. Irvin?
Doesn't matter.
So it sounds like the 17th is the preference. And that actually probably works out better because if we schedule all of the items on the 9th and then we choose to get through it, great. But if we need to, we can push the things that we don't get done to the 17th.
But doesn't that upset the public if they have been planning on, and the applicant, if they were planning on, being available for that? Is it fair?
I think as we get further along this month, we'll have a better sense of our agenda. So, if we need to and we decide that we definitely will need to have that second meeting, we might just let applicants know that their items based on the order of receipt will be heard either on the 9th or 17th.
And it's fair to the public that way, I think.
Mr. Song.
Just to comment, I noticed on the previous city council and also in our planning commission that we have the option of the candidates coming to chamber. And I think that's a really good idea, having the staff members and also if possible, the case design team or developers and so on. Is that something that you guys also agree? And is that, David, something that it's going to be the normal, from here until things get better?
Yeah, so we are doing that for public hearing items. And so that's kind of been helpful because I know a lot of times the audio is not great when we're doing it over the phone. So ideally we have them either on the Zoom, which I think has been working out a lot better than calling applicants when we have projects and we have public hearings and we're trying to listen to them and they're trying to listen to you and it becomes problematic. So I think it's been working out better with the Zoom, the online version where our applicants are able to join us online. And so I think that's better. But yeah, if we can have, if the design team or if the applicant prefers to be in the chamber and we are able to do appropriate spacing, we will continue to do that in our current state.
It really helped on the 2 meetings we had today that dealt with design. The 2 public hearing items we had that didn't deal with design, I think it was just fine that the applicant joined us on Zoom.
And that's all I have for you.
Great, well, thank you. With that, unless anybody else has any comments, we will adjourn until December 5:30 on December 9th. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Great seeing everyone. Have a good night.